So some of the best news that I got earlier this week is that my favorite team, the Washington Wizards, have the number 2 overall pick in the upcoming NBA draft. And this is a major breath of fresh air for Wizards fans because last season was horrific. Going into the season, I had a lot of hope. I knew it was going to be year one of a rebuilding process in that post Bradley Beal era. And I was excited to see what Jordan Poole was going to do now that he's kind of got his own quote unquote team. So I was never the biggest Jordan Poole fan going into the season, but as I said, as a Wizards fan, I've got to be hopeful. I've got to wish for the best. But he came in this year and he just was not impressive at all. And it was so bad to a point where he ended up being benched. And he was solid in that bench role, but still not what you expect for a guy that you brought in here to be, or at least show off that he can be a future franchise level player. And also somebody who has championship experience. He won a title in 2022 as a key rotational piece, along with Stephen Curry, who was arguably the greatest point guard of all time. So I'm not sure why things didn't click for Jordan Poole, but it was very, very disappointing to see how the season ended off for him. There are also some positive moments near the end of the season. So for one, Deni Avdija was really, really good and showed some ability from a defensive standpoint, improvements from a shooting standpoint, and is also a great rebounder and showed that he can be a key piece in this rebuild moving forward. And he could potentially be like a 20-point per game scorer sometime down the road. He showed off that type of upside in an elevated role. Also, Bilal Coulibaly, our draft pick from last season, was pretty good his rookie year. Averaged 8 points, but showed some upside defensively. That was one of his biggest calling cards once we picked him. And also some solidity as a shooter. Early on in the year, he was pretty efficient, shooting it like in the high 30s from the three-point line. But near the end of the season, kind of came down to earth just a bit and ended around 34%, 35%, which is okay for a guy who's never really been known as a great three-point shooter. So there were some highlights last season. But ultimately, here we are with this number 2 overall pick in what people are calling a weak draft class. But if we're going to pick in a weak draft class, it's better to pick high, right? And now you're in a situation where the number 1 overall draft pick isn't clearly the best player, right? So you're picking at number 2, you're picking a guy who could have easily been a number 1 pick as well. If you look at a lot of mock drafts, if you have 5 different mock drafts that you look at this year, that could be like 3 different people projected at number 1, which is a total contrast to last season, where it was undoubtedly Victor Wembanyama as the guy who whoever had that top pick would have picked. So that's the upside of picking second in what is a weak draft class. The guy you get at 2 could be just as good of a prospect as the guy you're picking here at 1. So let's break down the biggest need here for the Washington Wizards relative to our situation. Tyus Jones is our point guard. Tyus Jones is one of the most underrated point guards in the league. If you're looking for a true point guard who's efficient, keeps control of the basketball, can knock down shots, he can play make, he is that guy. Not an all-star, but just a really, really solid point guard. Only issue is he's about to be a free agent. And we had an opportunity to trade his expiring contract and get something back for him at the deadline. We didn't do it. So now we're going to end up losing Tyus Jones, and that does leave a big hole at the point guard position for us. If you are rebuilding, one of the biggest things you have to start with, and I could be wrong, is having a really, really good lead guard to develop, a really good point guard to develop over time. I looked at a lot of mock drafts, really a lot of polls that a lot of Wizards fans voted on, and the guys they're voting for us to take at number 2 the most is Stephon Castle from UConn, who I'm a big fan of, and Zacharrie Richachae. Those are like the 2 most common guys I'm seeing that Wizards fans are saying we should get. If we're going to lose Tyus Jones in the offseason, which is very, very likely considering that at this age, he wants to play for a true contender, and I don't blame him. If that's going to end up being the case, then you go for a point guard. I don't think we need to keep stockpiling on wings, especially with the upside that Coulibaly showed last season. And we just really need to commit to developing him over the next couple of years, and also the upside that Deni Avdija shows. I don't think right now we have a big need for getting another wing guy. And Stephon Castle, even if you could play him as a lead guard, doesn't have the shooting ability as a lot of other highly touted lead guards in this draft. And so that leads me to who I think the 3 best guys based on our needs are. For one, Reed Sheppard from Kentucky, and then Rod Dillingham from Kentucky as well, who I got to see a lot. I'm a big Kentucky fan as well. And also Nikola who played overseas. So biggest thing here is I'm most in favor of Rob Dillingham being the guy we pick at 2. And if you look at a lot of mock drafts for the Wizards, they're saying don't pick him at 2. They're saying either Stephon Castle, Richachae, Toppage, a bunch of other guys, but Rob Dillingham hasn't gotten a lot of buzz from Wizards fans as the guy we take at 2. I think we do it. For one, I think he's the best scorer at the lead guard position in this class, a great off the catch shooter, very efficient in that area, amazing off the dribble, one of the best shot creators in the entire class, and showed off some really solid playmaking ability, right? He kind of shared playmaking duties with Reed Sheppard, played very well off of him. They're one of the best backcourts in all of college basketball. But when he got the opportunity to play make, he did that at a pretty high level. And so if you bring him over here in Washington and prioritize that, he can show off even more from a playmaking front. Is he the best playmaker out of these 3? No. But I think that combined with his ability to score the basketball makes him such a major threat when we have this gaping hole at the point guard position. Toppage is a very intriguing prospect because of his size as a lead guard. He's 6'6" and an amazing passer, especially in pick and roll scenarios, but not an amazing shooter, not an amazing finisher, not the athlete that Rob and also Reed Sheppard is. He'd be a bit more of a gamble, right? I see a lot of times when teams kind of pick these European guys earlier on or these overseas players earlier on, the guys that can't shoot very well, they don't end up doing very well, right? Those guys who have a lot of great things like size and passing ability or whatever the case may be, if there's a major hole when it comes to their ability to shoot, there's a bit of a wall they hit for their first couple of years while developing over there. The guy I'm thinking about the most here is Dante Exum. He ended up becoming a really good role player, but still, at the same time, never really got to be the player that a lot of people projected him to be. And I feel like that could be the same thing here with Toppage. I'm a big fan of him. I'm a big fan of his playmaking ability, but I think Rob's playmaking mixed with his scoring and his ability to finish just makes for a better pick for us at that number 2 position. Reed Sheppard, solid playmaker, the best defensive player out of these 3 guys, but I'm not as high on his shot creating ability relative to Rob Dillingham. So I'm just a fan of the all-around skill set Dillingham has. The ability to create shots, the ability to play make. Is he the strongest defensive player? No, not at all. But that's one thing if you're picking a young point guard that you know you can work on through this developmental process. And also on top of that, they have some pretty solid perimeter defenders out there to kind of bail them out. Coulibaly, I think, is going to continue to make major leaps from a defensive perspective. Deni Avdija was really solid last year as a defender and showed off the ability to be a great point of attack defender as well. Yeah, he'll be out there Jordan Poole, which could be a nightmare, but Rob has shown this ability, I mentioned it earlier, to play well off of other guards. And he came off the bench. So he's a guy who's shown this ability to commit well to his team by accepting a role that he didn't think he was going to have coming into the year, coming off the bench, and, showed this amazing maturity as well. So I don't think his fit with Jordan Poole is going to be as bad as I originally thought. Originally, I was like, let's not draft Rob Dillingham if Jordan Poole is going to stay. But then I sat back and thought about it again, and I'm like, I looked at how well he played off of Reed Sheppard. I think some of that can translate over here in Washington while he's playing alongside with Jordan Poole, if they end up keeping Jordan Poole. So I'm big on us picking Rob Dillingham. I just like his ceiling a lot more. I like what he already has. And I think everything else is going to be pretty easy for us to develop, right? It's not going to be as easy for us to develop a three-point shot and the ability to be a scoring threat for Toppage, right? With Reed Sheppard, just not confident enough in his ability to shot create. So Rob isn't perfect. I mentioned the defense and those sorts of things, but there's a lot more to work with here. And I think that's the guy we should pick here at number 2. As I said, I think we're fine with the off guard positions, right? The 2s and the 3s. I think we're fine with that right now. If we lose Tyus Jones in the offseason for nothing, which is inevitably going to end up happening, then we go for a really good lead guard like Rob. And I think he's going to be really, really good. And I actually think he has a lot of rookie of the year upside, right? With his ability to shot create and things like that. I think the biggest thing he'll struggle with is efficiency in year 1 and also the defense. But I think he'll have some amazing scoring nights. He's got okay enough size at 6'3", which is maybe like around the average size for an NBA point guard at this point. So I really like what he brings to the table. And I think he'd be a good fit for what we already have. So biggest things for him, if we take him, like I said, is defense, how much he continues to develop as a playmaker, and also just his ability to kind of play off of Jordan Poole. But I think that's our pick. I think that'll be a major step in the right direction throughout this rebuild process. And I think he's the best guy available after Alexandre Sarr, right? And there's a lot of debates about that. Nobody right now is clearly the best player in this class. So everything at that point is just opinion. So in my opinion, I think Rob is best guy available right after Alexandre Sarr. And we're the Wizards. We need a point guard because Tyus Jones is definitely not locked in for the future. We go for Rob. And it's going to be an interesting next couple of years. And even if we're bad, right? We're going to have another shot at it, at having probably a top 5, top 7-ish pick in next year's class, which is much stronger than this one. So be patient, Wizards fans. A lot of you, I'm seeing you on Twitter, and you're kind of hoping to speed up this process. It's going to be a couple of years, right? But while it's going to be a couple of years, let's make sure we're at least developing the right pieces. And I think Rob is the absolute right piece for our situation right now.